Here's an explanation of system codes for Power User in Stemmons Enterprise. A system code is a metadata tag applied to fields on various lists to link disparate fields to a common concept. You can think of it as metadata on metadata, or just a normalization technique. For example, imagine that you're running a school. At the school, there's a whole bunch of things that show up on lists. It could be grades, or attendance, or book orders, or club meetings or events, so on and so forth. If we look carefully at those lists, we'll see that certain things show up on a lot of them. For example, student might be on a bunch of them, and we also have teachers showing up in various places or rooms in the school to show where something is happening. Even though these lists are different, we can link these concepts together with system codes, one for student, one for teacher, and one for rooms. Here's another example from the food service industry. In this case, we have the same context, but a lot of different names for similar things. Here's Chuck's menu, and they've got starters. A bunch of other menus have other names for the same kind of thing. Munchies, antipasti, snacks, we all know they're starters. So we'll create a system code, and now we can understand these menus in ways that cut across all of the different language. Now let's flip this around. We're going to look at a variation with very different contexts, but the same names for things. So there's Chuck's menu, but we also have the recipe cards and the food orders and the POS and maybe a list of nutritional information, and we want to see how those things relate together around the concept of starters. Again, we can apply a system code, and now we have visibility into all these different things in a common way. Here's how system codes might work to normalize task lists. Let's say you're running a commercial property, and you have a bunch of lists of things like work orders and customer requests and so on and so forth. Almost definitely the concept of property is going to show up on every one of these lists. If you're a Stemmons Power user, you'll know that we want to populate that list from a common data source. And that's important, but it doesn't cover the concept of telling the system that property in one of these lists is the same as property in the other. So what we do is we create a system code and we connect it to all of those lists. Once we've done that, we can roll up all the tasks of any different type into one common list organized by property. It's not just task lists that we can keep track of. There's things like customers and the team associated with the property and the vendors you're using, maybe equipment that's on site and documents and reports that relate to it. We can roll all those things up as well because we have a common system code indicating that they relate to one property. Task status is another common area where we see system codes. So for example, here's a bunch of task lists, and of course status appears on many of them. So we'll create a system code called status, and that way we can understand these things in a common way. But if we take it to the next level, we can do some really cool things. Let's look closely at the values for status in each of these things. If you've got a work order, you might call it new or assigned, or it's in process, or maybe it's complete. Well, those values for the status fields are going to be different for each of these different kinds of lists. The construction department will want to know if something is out for permit, but that doesn't really make sense for the leasing team. So each group gets to define their own values. But if we make a little room and look closely, we'll see some commonalities. They all have something that constitutes new, so we can make that a system code. They all have something that constitutes closed, and we can do the same thing with that. Now, in the middle, we see all kinds of words that people are using to describe their tasks as they're in process, but we can group them under one system code called open. This is really important because once we do that, we can have things happen automatically based on the system code for status. For example, we may automatically kick off a workflow when something is open or closed or new, or we may generate reports based on these things or activate a trigger, and these things can affect all of these different areas of the company, which is really powerful. So let's talk about best practices a little. One of the things to watch out for is how many system codes you have. If you have too few, you end up with siloed data and you can't really bring things together. On the other hand, if you have too many, it causes a bunch of challenges for reporting that you'll have to experience before you really understand. But trust me, we want that kind of Goldilocks number. The place to start is with your core taxonomy. Things like vendor, customer, product, property, region, market. Things that you commonly use to describe your business that are non-controversial and are going to show up in a lot of places. If you start with those, you're going to be on the right path. Now, power users will appreciate this. System codes are kind of the unsung heroes of Stemmons. The truth is they generate all kinds of incredible value and opportunities, but most casual users won't really notice that you've done it right. But we will. So if you have any questions or comments, give us a ring. And in the meantime, we hope this helped explain system codes.